Shocking statement. President Hakainde Hichilema breaks silence on Edgar Lungu. No one expected this from President Hichilema, not even Lungu himself. In a move that has stunned the nation, President Hichilema has finally spoken out about former President Edgar Lungu, and what he said has left Zambia speechless. Was it a warning, a reconciliation, or a call for accountability? Watch this explosive video to uncover the full story behind Hichilema's powerful words and what this could mean for Zambia's political future. And this video, Hichilema's direct statement about Edgar Lungu, public and political reactions across Zambia. What this means for Zambia's future leadership, potential impact on PF and UPND alliances, analysts take on the growing tension. Why you should watch. Zambia is at a turning point, and President Hichilema's remarks could change the course of national politics. Don't miss this deep dive into the shockwaves shaking Lusaka and beyond. Join the discussion. What do you think of Hichilema's message? Is it justified or political strategy? Comment below. Detailed analysis of Hichilema's statement on Edgar Lungu and its implications. Hichilema's direct statement about Edgar Lungu. On June 4, 2025, during a high-profile handover ceremony of Konkola Copper Mine, KCM, to Vedanta Resources in Chingola, President Hakainde Hichilema made a rare and sharply worded public statement about his predecessor, former President Edgar Lungu. Hichilema remarked, "Lungu talks too much for a failure," and suggested that Lungu needed a medical checkup to determine if he was normal. He accused Lungu of wrongly attributing Zambia's ongoing electricity deficit, caused by a severe drought, to his administration's failures, stating, "This drought is not the making of HH as my colleagues have said. Who am I to stop the rain? Without the drought, we would have no electricity deficit." Hichilema further criticized Lungu's presidency, claiming that Lungu had destroyed the country through economic mismanagement and corruption, contrasting it with his own administration's methodical approach to governance. He urged Lungu to focus on solving problems rather than creating them. This statement was a significant departure from Zambia's traditionally restrained political rhetoric, where personal attacks, especially questioning a former president's mental state, are uncommon. The context of the statement is critical. Zambia is grappling with a severe power crisis due to low water levels at Kariba Dam, leading to prolonged load shedding of up to 20 hours daily. Lungu, who has remained politically active since losing the 2021 election, has capitalized on these challenges, publicly blaming Hichilema's leadership and rallying supporters with the slogan, "Alabuela Po, he will return." Hichilema's remarks appear to be a direct response to Lungu's criticisms, particularly Lungu's claim that the power crisis reflects Hichilema's incompetence. The personal nature of the attack, delivered at a public event, underscores Hichilema's frustration with Lungu's continued influence and his efforts to undermine the United Party for National Development, UPND, government ahead of the 2026 general elections. Public and political reactions across Zambia. Hichilema's statement has sparked intense and polarized reactions across Zambia, reflecting the country's deep political and regional divisions. These reactions can be categorized by stakeholder groups. UPND supporters. Supporters of Hichilema and the UPND have largely embraced the statement, viewing it as a bold and justified critique of Lungu's presidency, 2015 to 2021, which they associate with economic collapse, ballooning national debt from $2.1 billion in 2011 to over $14 billion by 2021, and widespread corruption allegations. On platforms like X and in pro-UPND media outlets such as the Zambian Observer and Newsdiggers, supporters have praised Hichilema for calling out Lungu. For example, a post on X stated, "HH is right. Lungu left the economy in shambles, and now he's blaming drought for his own failures. Zambia deserves better." UPND strongholds in southern, western, and northwestern provinces have echoed this sentiment, with community leaders and youth groups rallying behind Hichilema's assertive stance. Some supporters have even called for stronger measures against Lungu, citing ongoing investigations into his family's wealth, including the arrests of his son Dalitso Lungu and daughter-in-law Esther Lungu on charges of money laundering and possession of properties suspected to be proceeds of crime. Supporters and Lungu loyalists. The Patriotic Front, PF, and its supporters have reacted with outrage, describing Hichilema's statement as disrespectful, unpresidential, and a dangerous escalation of political rhetoric. Lungu's base, particularly in the Copperbelt, eastern, and northern provinces, views the remarks as an attack not only on Lungu but on their regional and political identity. PF leaders, including Acting President Given Labinda and Secretary General Raphael Nakachinda, have accused Hichilema of orchestrating a campaign of persecution against Lungu and his allies. They point to actions such as the Constitutional Court's 2024 ruling barring Lungu from running in 2026, the dismissal of 3 Constitutional Court judges who previously ruled in Lungu's favor, and the seizure of assets linked to Lungu's associates as evidence of targeted political vendettas. A PF rally in Kitwe saw supporters chanting "Alabwela Po," with one speaker declaring, "HH is scared of Lungu's influence, so he resorts to insults and arrests." Social media posts from PF-aligned accounts have called Hichilema's remarks a low blow, with some accusing him of undermining Zambia's democratic norms by attacking a former head of state. General public and civil society, among ordinary Zambians, reactions are mixed and often reflect economic frustrations rather than strict party loyalty. In urban areas like Lusaka and Dola, some citizens appreciate Hichilema's candor, seeing it as a refreshing break from diplomatic niceties. A market trader in Lusaka remarked to Zambian Business Times, "HH is saying what many think, Lungu's time was tough, and he's not helping now by talking too much." However, others, especially in rural areas where Lungu retains strong support, view the statement as divisive and disrespectful. A farmer in Machinga province told BBC Africa, "Insulting a former president like that is not our culture. HH should focus on fixing power, not fighting Lungu." Civil society organizations, such as the Non-Governmental Organizations Coordinating Council, NGOC, have expressed concern over the rising political temperature, warning that such rhetoric could inflame tensions and undermine national unity. The Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a statement urging both leaders to lower the tone and prioritize dialogue to address economic challenges. International observers, the international community, including the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and human rights organizations like Amnesty International, has noted the growing political friction. A report by the Africa Center for Strategic Studies highlighted concerns about Zambia's democratic backsliding, citing Hichilema's judicial interventions and verbal attacks as potential risks to stability. These reactions underscore the broader implications of the statement for Zambia's reputation as a stable democracy in the region. Implications for Zambia's future leadership. Hichilema's statement and the resulting fallout have far-reaching implications for Zambia's political leadership, particularly as the 2026 elections loom. These implications span electoral dynamics, institutional trust, and leadership style. Electoral dynamics and polarization. Zambia's political landscape is already polarized, with regional voting patterns favoring UPND in the South 0 South and West and PF in the North and East. Hichilema's attack on Lungu risks deepening this divide, potentially alienating swing voters in urban and rural areas where Lungu's influence persists. Political analyst Neo Simutanii warns that Hichilema's narrow victory margin in 2021, 50.7% versus Lungu's 46.1%, means he cannot afford to lose moderate voters. Lungu, though constitutionally barred from running in 2026, is likely to back a surrogate candidate, possibly through the newly formed Tons Alliance or People's Pact. His enduring popularity, evidenced by the Alabwela Po chants in markets and villages, suggests that his chosen candidate could consolidate PF's base, particularly in the Copperbelt and northern regions, making the 2026 election highly competitive. Hichilema's statement may galvanize opposition voters, framing the election as a referendum on his leadership versus Lungu's legacy. Leadership style and public perception. Hichilema campaigned in 2021 as a unifier who would restore the rule of law and economic stability. His personal attack on Lungu risks undermining this image, portraying him as combative rather than statesmanlike. While this may energize his core supporters, it could alienate voters who value decorum and expect the presidency to embody national unity. Political commentator Nick Cheeseman notes that Hichilema's rhetoric may appeal to urban, middle-class voters but risks losing rural support, where cultural norms prioritize respect for elders and former leaders. Hichilema's challenge will be to balance his assertive stance with inclusive messaging to maintain a broad coalition. Institutional trust and democratic norms. Hichilema's administration has faced criticism for actions perceived as targeting Lungu and his allies, including the dismissal of 3 constitutional court judges in December 2024, the arrests of Lungu's family members, and the seizure of PF-linked assets. These moves, coupled with the personal attack, have fueled accusations of authoritarianism. The Law Association of Zambia has warned that judicial interventions, such as the judge dismissals, undermine public trust in institutions, a critical factor for future leadership legitimacy. If voters perceive Hichilema as consolidating power, opposition candidates could gain traction by campaigning on restoring checks and balances. Economic and youth priorities. Zambia's youth, who make up over 60% of the population, are increasingly vocal about unemployment, over 20% in urban areas, inflation, 15.4% in 2025, and load shedding. Hichilema's focus on long-term reforms, such as the $3.5 billion IMF bailout and debt restructuring, has yet to deliver tangible relief for many. Lungu's allies could exploit this discontent by promising immediate economic interventions, appealing to frustrated youth and rural voters. Future leadership will need to prioritize visible economic progress to secure voter confidence, making the 2026 election a battle of economic narratives. Potential impact on PF and UPND alliances. Hichilema's statement and the broader political context could significantly reshape the alliances of the Patriotic Front, PF, and United Party for National Development, UPND Patriotic Front, PF, and opposition alliances. The PF is deeply divided, with leadership disputes following Lungu's ousting by Miles Sampa in 2023 and Robert Shabinga's subsequent leadership claim. Hichilema's attack may unify Lungu's faction, strengthening his influence within the PF and opposition coalitions like the TONS Alliance, which includes the Socialist Party, Citizens First, and other smaller parties. The TONS Alliance has gained traction in rural areas, leveraging Lungu's Alabuela Po narrative to rally supporters. However, internal PF conflicts, such as Lungu's reported dissatisfaction with the United Kwacha Alliance, UKA, could hinder opposition unity. Lungu's potential shift to lead the TONS Alliance or the newly formed People's Pact risks further fracturing the PF if factions align with rival leaders like Sampa or Shabinga. The opposition's success in 2026 will depend on consolidating these factions, a task complicated by Lungu's polarizing presence and legal challenges facing his allies. United Party for National Development, UPND. Hichilema's statement reinforces his anti-Lungu stance, likely solidifying support among UPND's urban and southern base. However, it risks alienating rural voters in PF strongholds, where Lungu's influence remains strong. The UPND's urban focus and reliance on international partnerships, such as with the IMF and Vedanta, may weaken its rural engagement, critical for securing the 50% plus one vote threshold. Accusations of authoritarianism, including the perception that Hichilema is using state institutions to target PF members, could deter moderate supporters and potential coalition partners. To counter this, UPND may need to forge new alliances with smaller parties, such as the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD, remnants or independent MPs, to broaden its appeal. Failure to address economic grievances, like load shedding and high living costs, could strain existing alliances, particularly with youth and labor groups. Broader coalition dynamics. The TONS Alliance's emergence as a Lungu-backed coalition could attract voters disillusioned with UPND's economic performance, particularly in rural areas. Its success hinges on uniting disparate opposition factions, a challenge given Lungu's legal battles and PF's internal strife. Conversely, UPND must counter perceptions of elitism and governance overreach, possibly by highlighting tangible economic gains, such as the KCM handover, to retain coalition partners. The 2026 election will likely see both sides seeking to expand their coalitions, with smaller parties and independent candidates playing a pivotal role in tipping the balance. Analysts' take on the growing tension. Analysts across Zambia and the region have offered nuanced perspectives on the escalating tension between Hichilema and Lungu, highlighting its implications for Zambia's political stability and democratic future. Neo Simutanii, University of Zambia Simutanii argues that Lungu's constitutional ineligibility does not diminish his influence, as his surrogate candidate could capitalize on his enduring popularity, particularly in the Copperbelt and northern provinces. He notes that Hichilema's narrow 2021 victory margin and ongoing economic challenges, such as a 15.4% inflation rate and 20-hour load shedding, make 2026 a tight race. Simutanii warns that Hichilema's personal attacks could backfire by energizing Lungu's base, potentially leading to a unified opposition under the TONS Alliance. Sishiwa, political historian Sishiwa describes Hichilema's judicial interventions, particularly the dismissal of 3 constitutional court judges in December 2024, as a dangerous political game, aimed at neutralizing Lungu's influence. He argues that these actions, combined with a verbal attack, risk undermining judicial independence and public trust in democratic institutions. Sishiwa warns that Zambia's history of peaceful transitions could be jeopardized if tensions escalate, potentially leading to protests or violence. Laura Mitty, social commentator Mitty, highlights a divided public response, with some viewing Hichilema's actions as legally justified given the dismissed judge's controversial 2016 election petition rulings. However, she notes that others see these moves as politically motivated, undermining Hichilema's democratic credentials. Midi suggests that Hichilema's statement reflects frustration with Lungu's persistent criticism but risks alienating voters who value national unity. Aon Gambi, geopolitics analyst Gambi attributes Lungu's political resurgence to public dissatisfaction with Hichilema's handling of economic challenges, including a 20% unemployment rate and currency depreciation, ZMW 26 to $1 in 2025. He argues that Hichilema's attacks and legal actions against PF members are perceived as authoritarian, potentially strengthening Lungu's narrative of persecution and boosting opposition support. Thandai Uketi's Ngoma, the Zambian observer Ngoma frames Hichilema's statement as a sign of political desperation to counter Lungu's growing influence, particularly through the Tons Alliance. She argues that Lungu's popularity, fueled by economic discontent, poses a significant threat to UPND's re-election prospects. Ngoma warns that continued escalation could destabilize Zambia's political climate, citing historical examples of rhetoric leading to unrest, such as the 2016 election violence. Chanda Hamoundu, economic analyst Hamoundu emphasizes the economic context, noting that the power crisis and high living costs overshadow Hichilema's achievements, such as the KCM deal. He suggests that Lungu's allies could exploit these issues to portray Hichilema as out of touch, potentially shifting voter sentiment in favor of opposition coalitions. Conclusion: Hichilema's direct and personal statement against Lungu has significantly heightened Zambia's political tensions, polarizing public and political reactions along regional and partisan lines. The statement reflects frustration with Lungu's ongoing criticisms but risks alienating moderate voters and undermining Hichilema's image as a unifying leader. For Zambia's future leadership, the incident foreshadows a contentious 2026 election, with economic challenges and institutional trust as central issues. The PF and opposition alliances may consolidate around Lungu's influence, while UPND must broaden its coalition to counter rural discontent. Analysts warn that escalating rhetoric and perceived overreach could threaten Zambia's democratic stability, making the path to 2026 a critical test of leadership and national unity. Addressing economic grievances and fostering inclusive dialogue will be essential for both sides to secure voter confidence and maintain Zambia's reputation as a democratic exemplar in the region.